Hey guys, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. Guys, I knew this was gonna happen. I was gonna make my end of the year video and then immediately something was gonna come out, or at least I was gonna check something out that definitely would have been on the list and I should have waited a little bit more, but what can you do? Today I'm going to be reviewing Babylon, which is the new film by Damien Chazelle. Its plot chronicles the rise and fall of multiple characters during Hollywood's transition from silent to sound films in the late 1920s. I actually hadn't seen a Damien Chazelle film before this. It was kind of one of my big modern blind spots, and so before doing this review, after seeing Babylon, I figured I would check out at least his other films about sort of making it in the arts business. I really liked Whiplash. I think it's really intense, insightful, if maybe a little bit small-scaled film. And even though I wasn't huge on La La Land, I did like a lot of aspects of it. I do think it's one of the best directed musicals probably of this century. It just, a lot of the, I just didn't really connect to its emotional core very much. But then we have Babylon, which right off the bat, I think is maybe the ballsiest movie I've ever seen in my life. It costs around $80 million, and I think it's probably the most expensive exploitation movie I've ever seen. If you adjust for inflation going back to 1995, I do think Showgirls is about the same budget as Babylon. Showgirls is one of my all-time favorite movies, and it's really the only movie I could really think of to compete for most expensive exploitation film. And with the nature of it being an exploitation movie, this has been an absolute disaster for the studio who financed it, possibly for Chazelle's career. It's going to be a big box office bomb, but I don't think that has anything to do with the quality of the film itself, despite the fact that it's been getting pretty lukewarm reviews. So why is this an exploitation movie? It's because it's an uncensored look at what Hollywood would have been like in the 1920s, and it exploits sex, violence, and general depravity in order to do that. This movie is complete with orgies, hog shots, completely vulgar characters. Every bodily fluid you could possibly think of is in this movie. I mean, the movie opens with two hilariously in-your-face bodily fluid gags, and it really doesn't feel like it lets up for the rest of the film. The opening 20 to 30 minutes of the movie is basically one long sort of party sequence, and I like the rest of the movie just fine, but in terms of just a director capturing movie magic and just having everything click on all cylinders, probably nothing else in 2022 is going to come close to that first 20 to 30 minutes, opening minutes of Babylon for me. And a lot of the credit for this has to go to the incredible score by Justin Hurwitz. In an interview, he said that he wanted to use, sort of jazz instrumentation that is very true to the period, but he wanted to make it sound like something that is not true to the period. He wanted to make it more modern, a bit more ravey, so that people in our generation can understand what it was like to sort of, be alive at the height of the Roaring 20s in Hollywood. And I think he really knocked it out of the park in terms of capturing the energy. I've been listening to the soundtrack all week. I really love it. Strangely, too, neither the music nor the filmmaking for me really fall into that, I would say, Baz Luhrmann movie trap of the excess just feeling overly glitzy and kind of pandering for the sake of it. Although the music is really modern in terms of feel, the fact that it stays true to the instrumentation of the period really does make it feel authentic for me. And as for the filmmaking, I mean, even though it is very over the top in a sort of Baz Luhrmann way, it never feels like it's trying to glorify the period or sort of cover up the more depraved aspects. Those aspects blend really well with the sort of over-the-top maximalist nature of it. So, I don't know, it felt very tonally consistent and, to my liking. The fact that everything about the tone in the movie is so depraved very much captures the inherent darkness behind all of the excess in that period. And apart from even all the crazy filmmaking, the electric direction, I found a lot of the writing in this film quite compelling as well. I really like the ensemble structure of looking at the period through multiple characters' eyes, and through sort of that transition from sight to sound. The Margot Robbie character in particular, I found very believable. This is probably my favorite performance of her so far. There are so many shots throughout the film that really capture this sense that she's very mythical, and this woman who always knew that she was meant to be a star. And because we believe that so palpably, her tragedy throughout the film is all the more emotional. I don't want to spoil it, but the last time that we see her in the film, at least narratively, is a shot that's really, really stuck with me. A lot of the criticisms I've been seeing of this movie have been sort of around like how it handles this excess, and that it just gets a little bit exhausting after a while. I actually do think the film does give you a lot of moments to breathe. There are a lot of really quiet, contemplative moments, especially once we get towards the end, but in a sense throughout. Another thing I've been seeing a lot is that people are comparing its sort of commentary unfavorably to Singin' in the Rain. And I get it, this film constantly is referencing Singin' in the Rain itself, and I can understand how for some people that would just sort of make you think of how much better Singing in the Rain is in your head, especially when Babylon looks so like cynical by comparison. And I love Singing in the Rain too. It's one of my favorite like classic musicals, but I do think it's more important to remember that that film's not perfect. I personally feel like that movie has basically no sympathy for the Lena Lamont character, the sort of annoying antagonist that the film creates, who is basically a victim of the period of going from silent movies to sound because she has a really bad voice. And again, although I like the film, I find that it just, there's too much of it that's very just mean-spirited towards her and uses everything about her as the butt of a joke, as opposed to like a genuine tragedy to be explored. You know, for as much of an asshole as she is to other characters in the film, she is somebody who is in the prime of her career, and because of the way the industry's going, it's completely just relegated her to the shelves of history to just sort of watch that unfold while she's still, again, in her prime. And I think there's something really sad about that. And I think Babylon has a lot more sympathy for those characters, sort of Lena Lamont characters. I'm thinking specifically about Margot Robbie and also the Brad Pitt character, who I think Brad Pitt is really great in the movie. Even though people are talking about Singing in the Rain a lot, I do think a better comparison for how it's handling these kind of characters would be something like Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard, in which, like, you know, looking at Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, in Babylon, we're sort of immersed in the lives of these characters, and that includes their really depraved flaws. But because of the emotional weight of what they're going through, we do still feel their tragedy in the end, which I think is a good thing. And that's part of why I prefer the, you know, Sunset Boulevard take on Hollywood's transition than something like Singing in the Rain. So I did watch Babylon twice. This is one of the only times I've gone back to the theater for a movie this year, certainly for one that's as long as Babylon is. And part of that was just because I noticed a lot of flaws the first time around, and I wanted to see if those flaws really mattered for me a second time. I felt for the first time that the film was a little bit lost narratively and thematically. I felt that a lot less watching it a second time. I thought it all kind of, you know, unfolded and worked better for me. I do still feel like there are certain aspects of the writing, and especially thematically, that don't really ideas that don't fully come to fruition. Things I would have liked to see explored a little bit more, but it is a very long film already, of course. But yeah, like I said, it bothered me less the second time than the first time. One other issue I do have with the film is that despite the fact that this doesn't go too far into the sort of Baz Luhrmann glitz, I do find that Chazelle is a little bit showy, especially with his one-ers. I had the same issue in La La Land. A lot of the one-ers in that are really technically impressive, but in terms of like what they're trying to do thematically, or really even narratively for the story, it's kind of shallow, and therefore it just comes off as a little bit showy. I do feel like that kind of exists a little bit in Babylon too. But it is one of those things where it's like, you know, the reason why I really like the movie is because of how maximalist it is, and to an extent it does kind of still serve that. So yeah, I don't know, it bothered me a little bit, but not too much. Overall, I mean, this is just such a big fucking swing. I haven't seen a director or a studio take this big a risk in Hollywood in a very long time. It feels like, you know, the kind of Hollywood epic that you would get in kind of the 20s through the 60s, somewhere in there, but done with the sort of depravity that we can do with modern filmmaking. So in that sense, I've never really seen anything like it. It probably would have made my top 5 had I reviewed this before I made the end of the year video. I'm gonna give this the 4 for now, but I have a feeling that I just love it so much, eventually it might get there to the 5 for me. This was a really great time at the movies, both times. I highly recommend checking this out. It's really bombing in theaters right now, so it's probably not gonna be there for very long when it comes to an area near you. So when it does, go see it. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please like it down below and subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more videos coming out soon, and I will see you guys in the next one. See ya.